That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, my dudes, we are going to go through. I am going to talk about our top 5 must draft receivers. And what is great about this is I am not just coming out and going, okay, these are players that I like according to their cost. Instead, this is actually going to be my 5 most drafted players in 2021. Now, y'all know that I play in more fantasy football leagues than literally anybody else you're going to find. Because on Underdog Fantasy, you don't need to submit your starting lineups. You don't need to make waiver claims each and every week. It's actually called a best ball format. And I've been getting so many drafts in. We're over 100 drafts at this point. We stream every single night. So what's great is if you want to get in a draft with me, all you have to do, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell next to the subscribe button. That way you can come out during our live streams. You can hop in one of those drafts because I send out the invites in the live chat. So obviously, if you're watching that draft as a video later on, if you don't have that bell hit next to the subscribe button, I'm sorry. It's just going to be too late for you to go in and get in one of those leagues. And also on Underdog Fantasy, what is very unique about this platform is they still have not fixed a glitch that, I mean, they must be losing so much money with this. Because if you use promo code FLOCK and you make a $10 deposit so you can go in and you can play some fantasy football, then you get $25 added to your account. You get my 2021 rankings, my 2021 draft guide, my 2021 Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide. You get hundreds and hundreds of pages of information. You get those rankings, and I promise you, you do something that helps out this show more than you could ever imagine in your wildest dreams. I mean, this has been a wonderful football season so far, and I can't wait to continue to go through and crush some more. And that's it. Let's dive into my top 5 drafted receivers. Let's start it off with Mecole Hardman at 1. So I honestly didn't think I was going to be this high on Mecole Hardman. He has an ADP of 85. And I mean, he is going as the wide receiver 41. Now, a big thing with Mecole Hardman is I think that this is a great example of a player that, yes, you can draft him and just say 60% of the time he doesn't live up to his ADP. But we know in these middle rounds, what we are trying to do, which is why we're drafting a Kareem Hunt, it's the exact same situation. All you want to do is make sure that if you hit on a player, it's not just a hit. It's not that you draft them with the baseline expectation for the receiver to come out and give you 13 points per game. You get 13.8, you get 14.2, and you're like, okay, that was a good pick, yada, yada, yada. Let's move on with our day. No, we're not looking for that. We're looking to draft a player that if you look at the cost in terms of the draft capital spent, that you would expect on a median projection that player to possibly come out and give you 13 points per game. We are trying to find the guys that have it in the range of outcomes for them to go out and completely crush and for them to jump up where Mecole Hardman is being drafted as a wide receiver 4, not just for him to be a wide receiver 3 in fantasy. We want to find someone that can be a top 24 guy, and Mecole Hardman can easily be that. And I know a lot of people are going to be reluctant in drafting Mecole Hardman this season because, yes, he was a major disappointment last year. He was a disappointment his rookie season. I'll say if you were drafting him his rookie year, you have no idea who Mecole Hardman is. I will say that was always a very bad draft pick. Even though last year I thought that he was intriguing. His rookie season, if you drafted him, the fault's on you. Because you go back and you look at Mecole Hardman coming out of Georgia. Something that a lot of people don't understand with Mecole is this is someone that had to learn the receiver position. I mean, he actually played and he was recruited to Georgia as a defensive back. So he's gone through and he has been in development as a receiver. You know, when you have all those other receivers in college, I mean, they have 4 years at their respective school to learn the position. Then they get into the NFL. Usually they're not that productive as a rookie, and then they can come on their sophomore year and be extremely strong. Well, here with Mecole Hardman, it's a little bit different because he is going through and he's making that progression later on in his football career. But the reason why the Kansas City Chiefs drafted him in the 2nd round in that 2019 class, the same round where A.J. Brown, the same round where DK Metcalf both went, is because they viewed him as someone that had an elite ceiling down the line to play alongside Tyreek Hill. Or remember when he was drafted, we had the Tyreek Hill saga, didn't even know if Tyreek was going to be with the Kansas City Chiefs. But you look at the athletic profile for Mecole Hardman. This is someone that does have adequate size for the speed that he possesses. He's 5'10", 187 pounds. He ran a 4.33 40-yard dash. I mean, he is dynamic. And of course, if Mecole Hardman played on the Cleveland Browns, I don't even know if I would be drafting him, period. But a big thing is he's attached to the best quarterback in the entire NFL. So I think we can safely say, based on the amount of volume that this offense should see, that Mecole Hardman can easily reach his wide receiver 4 draft costs. No problem. No questions asked. And then we have the built-in handcuff upside. Very similar to a Kareem Hunt, where I think Kareem Hunt, who's being drafted as a high-end running back 3, he's going to crush that no matter what. And then if something were to happen to Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt jumps up to being a running back 1 in fantasy. I think you have something very similar here with Mecole Hardman, because we know that the Chiefs, regardless of what happens in the offense, regardless of if Tyreek Hill goes down, regardless of if Travis Kelce goes down, this is going to be one of the best offenses in football just due to the elite quarterback play that they have. So if we kind of map it out, and let's just go, what if something were to occur to Tyreek Hill? What if Tyreek Hill missed a 6-week stretch and you had Mecole Hardman sliding in as the wide receiver 1, presumably in that Tyreek Hill mold in this offense? Now, of course, Mecole isn't coming anything close to what Tyreek Hill gives you, because Tyreek Hill is just a significantly better receiver. But I think at that point, Mecole Hardman, and hear me out, because I know this is going to sound crazy, but if you just run a projection, if you just look at how volume dictates fantasy players to finish, Mecole Hardman would have to be a top 20 wide receiver in fantasy. And I think he has the upside for more than that. I think he could be a top 15, top 12 player if something were to occur to Tyreek Hill. So please don't just give up on Mecole Hardman. Sammy Watkins is now in Baltimore. They don't replace Sammy Watkins with anybody. Mecole Hardman, the number 2 receiver in Kansas City, I think he can easily hit a wide receiver 4 finish in fantasy. He's only 23 years old. And if something were to occur to Tyreek Hill, I mean, it may be one of those scenarios where if you didn't draft Mecole Hardman, you have no chance of winning your league. So now let's go over to someone else that y'all know I have been on over and over again in those live streams, Chris Godwin. And here with Godwin, I have to say this, and I know so many people are annoyed with me saying it. I'll probably say it for another year and then I'll shut my mouth. But I have to give out a disclaimer in telling y'all exactly how dumb I am. So in 2019, when Chris Godwin came out, averages 19.7 fantasy points per game, was the wide receiver 2 in fantasy points per game, only behind Michael Thomas. And he wasn't being drafted in the same range of a Michael Thomas. No, you were getting him in the 4th, 5th round of redraft leagues. That season where Chris Godwin broke fantasy football, I was calling him the most overrated wide receiver coming in to fantasy drafts. I was saying that OJ Howard was going to be the number 2 target in Tampa. I was saying that Mike Evans was a bona fide alpha receiver that was not going to split the target share with Chris Godwin. And we were horribly wrong. And you would think, based on how wrong I was on that call, that I'd have some pent-up emotion with a player like a Chris Godwin, that I would never want to draft him going forward. But it's the exact opposite here, because I think people have Chris Godwin fatigue. I think that Chris Godwin is the sleeper that everybody hit on a few years ago, but now they're overlooking the fact that we now have 2 years of data on Chris Godwin to show us exactly how elite he is in fantasy football. So right now, the reason I am drafting him everywhere is he is currently being drafted with the 41st pick overall. So he's going in the 4th round every single time. And he's going as the wide receiver 19. So he's being drafted as a mid to low end wide receiver 2. And we look at the past 2 seasons for Godwin. We already showed in 2019 when he was the wide receiver 2 in fantasy points per game. Now, yes, it was a different situation. You had Jameis Winston there who led the NFL in passing. Of course, you're not going to be expecting that to happen from Tampa this upcoming season. It's a small chance, but I don't want to say it's a large one. And then also, we have just no Antonio Brown. And yes, that makes a difference. I understand Antonio Brown's going to come in. He is going to cut into the target share that you should expect from this overall offense. But at the same time, if we go through and we look at a comparison of where he was last year, I mean, he actually finished the year last year extremely strong with Antonio Brown on that same team. And if you look at the second half of his season, it really shows the caliber of a Chris Godwin and that he can win with both volume and efficiency. And we really need to put into context, guys, that yes, you were most likely disappointed by Chris Godwin if you drafted him in the second round of fantasy drafts last year. But he suffered multiple injuries in 2020. He suffered multiple injuries. He still finished as the wide receiver 15 on a points per game basis. So while being injured, Chris Godwin came out, was the wide receiver 15 on a points per game basis. He actually averages 7 targets a game. And I'm sure if you take out the games where he got injured, that number would actually go up. So he has more fantasy points per game than Mike Evans. He has more targets per game than Mike Evans. And we know that this is someone that throughout his entire career, just like Mike Evans, he is going to finish in the upper end of the NFL in his touchdown rate on a per target basis. So I really think that Chris Godwin, who is currently only 25 years old, this is someone that you should expect to continue to get better. I know Mike Evans is in his prime. Mike Evans is 27. Well, Chris Godwin is just now stepping into his prime. He was the wide receiver 2 in fantasy at 23 years old. At 23 years old, he was the wide receiver 2. So now when he finishes as the wide receiver 15 on an injured year, y'all are dropping him to be the wide receiver 19 in fantasy drafts. I don't understand it. I whiffed on him 2 years ago. And I think that a lot of people are about to make that same mistake that I did. And I'm not going to be one of those guys. I'm going out there and I am drafting Chris Godwin heavily. So now our next call is going to be kind of boring, but I think that he is a great pick for really anybody. It's going to be a Will Fuller. Okay, so here with Will Fuller, he's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 42. So he's being drafted as a mid wide receiver 4 currently in fantasy drafts. He has an ADP of 86 overall. And if you look at Fuller last year, he was a top 10 receiver on a per game basis. He was the wide receiver 8. Now I understand with the Will Fuller, this is obviously someone that you have to worry about injuries with. And I know he didn't play the full season last year, but it wasn't with injuries. He actually got suspended due to PEDs. And yes, that may be just as concerning, but we saw Will Fuller make it through without really having the injury bug at all last year. And we have 2 seasons under his belt as well, where he beats his average draft position where he's currently going. In 2018, he was the wide receiver 21 on a points per game basis. And in 2019, he was the wide receiver 38 on a points per game basis. Now, keep in mind, I'm not adjusting it. I know that we could easily go out there and we could say, okay, well, Will Fuller, yes, he missed a couple games where he only played about 20% of the snaps because he left early with an injury. I'm not going to be taking those out in the instance of a Will Fuller because I think it's important to look at his overall statistics, even with the injured games in there. Because I will be the first person to admit that I think Will Fuller is at an elevated injury risk compared to other players at the position. Now, what we have to also do is we have to look at, okay, even baking in what's going to happen with him leaving games early, with him not playing 100% of the snaps every single game. How is that affecting his per game output? And Will Fuller still going out there and still being way more than a wide receiver 4 in fantasy. And now I understand that this is going to be a significant quarterback downgrade going from a Deshaun Watson to a Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, yes, that is a no bueno situation if we're going to put it frankly. But at the same time, what we actually have with the Will Fuller is the fact that if you go back to 2018 where we see him finish as the wide receiver 21, so a low-end wide receiver 2 in fantasy, we have to keep in mind that he was playing in an offense with DeAndre Hopkins. He's playing in an offense with a wide receiver that every single season is seeing 160 targets a game. Well, now he's playing alongside Jalen Waddle. And I will say this about very few receivers. I think there are very few receivers in the NFL that you actually want to be in the offense with another guy that you're drafting, because I know a lot of people will say, well, Mason, I mean, doesn't it help A.J. Brown that Julio Jones gets added in because Julio Jones is going to raise the efficiency of A.J. Brown's targets given the fact that the defense can't necessarily key in on A.J. Brown? While yes, that is true, you're actually going to see the efficiency get outweighed by the loss in targets that you're actually getting for the receivers when someone's being added into the offense. But I think a Jalen Waddle is one of the rare exceptions where he's actually going to make the receivers around him better. And the reason for that is Jalen Waddle is someone with elite speed that's not going to command a lot of volume. And what's great about someone with elite speed that doesn't command a lot of volume is that they're running those vertical routes. A lot of times they're going to have a safety kind of have to shadow them. And at the same time, Tua Tagovailoa, well, yes, whenever he does decide to target a Jalen Waddle, it should be highly efficient. You're not going to see a lot of volume going in that direction. So I'm viewing it as there are a lot of receivers injured currently in this wide receiver room. And with the Will Fuller, I think that he is actually the wide receiver 1 that you want in Miami. I think that Jalen Waddle being drafted to the situation is not necessarily a death nail for a Will Fuller. We have seen him beat his ADP over the past 3 years compared to where he's currently being drafted. And yes, you don't have him for week 1, but it's 1 week. Who freaking cares? Okay, so now let's go to our 4th receiver, someone that we've been taking a lot as well, and you're seeing his ADP start to rise. This is going to be Rondale Moore. Okay, so here with Rondale Moore, this is a receiver that I loved coming into the NFL draft. Now, I know a lot of people are going to focus in on a few things. There's going to be a group of people that go, Mason, he's an elite level athlete. He ran a 4.37 40-yard dash. This is also someone that we know, we all saw the vertical. We all saw him go out there and just destroy his pro day. And they're going to be the people on the other side that are focusing in on the fact going, well, Mason, he's 5'7". We have never seen a receiver be successful at the NFL level with that size. And I'll say, yes, those are both things that we need to bring up when discussing Rondale Moore. But what I think is actually a little more important is the situation he's stepping into, as well as the production that we had in college. So if you go back to Purdue, so Rondale Moore was actually a receiver that suffered injuries his sophomore and junior years. So you're not going to be able to draw anything from that. But if you go to Purdue in 2018, his true freshman season, at 18 years old, Rondale Moore came out and he was arguably the best receiver in the country. I mean, he crushed to a point where you wouldn't believe the stats. But Thomas, here, put him on the screen for everybody. Show them what Rondale Moore did at 18 years old. And this isn't at Division II. This is at Purdue. This is a real conference that you're going up against real defensive players. At 18 years old, Rondale Moore was able to put up those statistics. And to go along with this, what I always said with Rondale Moore is the situation is key, because he's not going to be able to go out there and just be a prototypical wide receiver that's going to be a DeAndre Hopkins, win on the outside, just beat contested catches over defensive backs. No, that can't be him whatsoever. What we always said with the Rondale Moore is he needed to land in a situation with a creative, offensive-minded head coach, not like New York, not like Houston. We needed him in Arizona. This is the perfect fit. He's going with Cliff Kingsbury. Now, I was drafting him before week 1, but in week 1, we got a small glimpse of unique packages where they are using Rondale Moore. They're using him almost exclusively in the slot as well, where we know Larry Fitzgerald got a ton of bubble screens. Now, if Larry Fitzgerald, who I know, one of the greatest of all time, was getting those bubble screens consistently at 37 years old last year, Rondale Moore with those same targets is going to be able to be significantly more efficient, given the fact that this is someone with elite speed. He can make plays after the catch. And I think that just given the creativity and the elite quarterback play that you're going to have in the offense, Rondale Moore is literally a perfect fit. So now we had some other receivers that are a little bit deeper, just because when we're drafting on Underdog, I mean, we're going really deep. We're doing 18 rounds. So we're going and getting a lot of guys at the very end of drafts, like a Dwayne Eskridge. I'm drafting a lot, but those are players that you're not actually going to be drafting in regular formats when you're not going that deep. So instead of looking at that super deep range of players like a Dwayne Eskridge and Nico Collins, instead, let me focus in on the next highest owned receiver that I currently have. And that's going to be Allen Robinson. And here with Allen Robinson, I mean, the thesis is simple. He is currently being drafted as the wide receiver 12 in fantasy drafts at an ADP of 29. So you're consistently getting him in the middle of the third round. And what I have said time and time again with an Allen Robinson is it's literally just as simple as me having Allen Robinson over Terry McLaurin. And that's why I draft Allen Robinson so much. Because you look at Allen Robinson, and if we compare him to Terry McLaurin, these are both receivers that suffered from some of the worst quarterback play in the NFL last year. These are both receivers that had no other options in the offense taking targets away from them. So they are both receivers that we got to see in very similar situations in 2020 as well as 2019. And then we actually see Allen Robinson go out, and in those situations, he is the wide receiver 10 on a fantasy points per game basis in 2019, and he was the wide receiver 13 in that similar situation in 2020. Now you go to a Terry McLaurin on the other end, and Terry McLaurin, while everybody in the comment section, for whatever reason, feels the need to go, oh, Terry McLaurin's been a wide receiver 1 in fantasy before without Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now he's going to be something better than that. That's never happened. Terry McLaurin's been a low-end wide receiver 2 in fantasy. So I understand McLaurin going into year 3. This is also someone that's going to be 26 years old. So he's significantly older than what you would actually expect. He's a lot closer to Allen Robinson's age than you would initially think. I think that you're getting the upgrade from a player like an Alex Smith to a Ryan Fitzpatrick. I don't know if that's a larger upgrade than what we have going from a Trubisky to the combination of Andy Dalton and Justin Fields. And to go along with this, we have seen the production consistently there with Allen Robinson. And in Washington, they add Curtis Samuel, Diami Brown, they have Logan Thomas. And in Chicago, they do not add a single body. So I'm looking at it going, really, the only reason that I'm drafting Allen Robinson in this many leagues is because so many people are making the mistake of drafting Terry McLaurin over Allen Robinson that we're just kind of getting him falling into our lap. In a lot of the middle of the third rounds, I'll be sitting at the 307. I'll be like, oh, well, thank you for letting me get Allen Robinson. I'm not going to complain. This is someone that's been a top 12 wide receiver before with Blake Bortles, with Mitchell Trubisky, with Nick Foles. Run it up with Justin Fields. Run it up with Andy Dalton. Let's see what he can do because they added nobody else. He's going to be getting 25% of this team's targets. And I think Allen Robinson's just going to crush in the third. Now, thank you, my dudes. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. Of course, go down there, drop that like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton. Use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. Go out there, get your draft guide, get your rankings, and get $25 added to your account. And hopefully, I'll see you in the live stream tonight. Thank you to everybody supporting the show on Patreon. We got some new members in MCGC, Brian, Matthew, Craig, Ian, Woody, Colt, Marcus, Jack, and Nicholas. Thank you, my dudes.